It began with a question that refused to go away. After the guns fell silent across the Pacific, American intelligence officers sat in crowded rooms surrounded by stacks of reports collected from battlefields, prisoner camps, and captured headquarters. Among thousands of pages was a strange pattern. Japanese soldiers who had survived battles against the United States Marines kept repeating the same kinds of descriptions.
If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.
They did not all know each other. They had fought on different islands, under different commanders, and at different times in the war. Yet many of their words sounded almost identical. Some called the Marines relentless. Others described them as impossible to stop. A few admitted they had expected an easy victory, only to discover an enemy unlike any they had imagined. The deeper investigators looked, the stranger the pattern became. What had these men seen on those islands? And why did so many of them remember the Marines in nearly the same way? Imagine it now. The Pacific Ocean stretches to every horizon. Thick jungle hides unseen dangers. Coral beaches shimmer under a burning sun. The air smells of salt, smoke, and damp earth. Somewhere beyond the trees, machine guns suddenly open fire. Mortar shells crash through palm branches. Men disappear into clouds of sand and dust. In these places, battles lasted not for hours, but for days and sometimes weeks. Every hill, every cave, and every patch of jungle became its own battlefield. It was here that thousands of Japanese soldiers first met the United States Marines face to face. Many expected one outcome. What actually happened would stay with them for the rest of their lives. The investigation begins on August 7, 1942. Before sunrise, the first major American offensive in the Pacific landed on Guadalcanal in the Solomon Islands. Major General Alexander Vandergrift led the 1st Marine Division ashore. Their first objective was an unfinished Japanese airfield that would later become Henderson Field. The landing itself surprised many Japanese troops. They had not expected such a large amphibious assault so quickly. Some defenders withdrew into the jungle, while others prepared counterattacks. At first, Japanese officers believed these Marines would soon be pushed back into the sea. Captured documents later revealed that many Japanese commanders underestimated the landing force. Training before the war had often described Americans as lacking determination. Some believed they depended too much on equipment and would lose their fighting spirit under pressure. Those ideas had been repeated so often that many soldiers accepted them as fact before ever seeing an American Marine. But Guadalcanal became the first major test of those beliefs. Only 2 weeks later, during the Battle of the Tarawa on August 20, Colonel Kiyonao Ichiki led his force in a night attack against Marine positions east of Henderson Field. His men believed speed, surprise, and aggressive spirit would overwhelm the defenders. Instead, they encountered carefully prepared Marine defenses supported by machine guns, artillery, and disciplined rifle fire. As dawn arrived, the battlefield revealed hundreds of Japanese casualties. Colonel Ichiki's force had been almost completely destroyed. American intelligence officers later questioned Japanese prisoners captured during the Guadalcanal campaign. Several admitted they had never expected Marines to remain so calm under repeated attacks. They described American defensive fire as steady, rather than chaotic. One prisoner reportedly explained that every time they believed Marine lines had broken, fresh fire erupted from another hidden position. To the attackers, it seemed as though the defenses never truly ended. That observation appeared again in later interrogations. Again and again, Japanese survivors described something they had not expected. The Marines rarely rushed without purpose. They advanced carefully, built defensive positions quickly, and supported every movement with artillery, mortars, or naval gunfire whenever possible. Instead of relying only on courage, they combined firepower with planning. For Japanese troops trained to admire aggressive attacks above all else, this was an unsettling discovery. The investigation then moved forward several months. Reports from Guadalcanal were no longer isolated cases. More testimony arrived after each campaign. Intelligence officers noticed another repeated description. Japanese soldiers often remarked that Marines continued attacking even after suffering heavy casualties. They expected losses to slow American momentum. Instead, replacements arrived, units reorganized, and the pressure resumed. One captured soldier reportedly described it as fighting waves that never stopped reaching the shore. By late 1943, the next major clue emerged from one of the smallest islands in the Pacific. Tarawa measured barely 2 miles across, yet it became one of the bloodiest battles of the war. On November 20, 1943, the 2nd Marine Division landed on Betio Island in the Tarawa Atoll. Rear Admiral Keiji Shibazaki commanded approximately 4,800 Japanese defenders. Before the invasion, he reportedly declared that even 1,000,000 Americans could not capture Tarawa in 100 years. The prediction lasted less than 4 days. The landing itself nearly became a disaster. Low tide exposed coral reefs that trapped many American landing craft hundreds of yards from shore. Marines were forced to leave their boats and cross open water while carrying rifles, ammunition, radios, flamethrowers, and heavy packs. Japanese machine guns fired from reinforced bunkers. Mortars exploded across the lagoon. Men fell into the shallow water before ever reaching the beach. For many units, simply arriving on land became a battle for survival. Japanese defenders watched this terrible scene unfold. At first, many believed the assault had failed. American casualties mounted rapidly. Smoke covered the beaches. Some positions remained pinned down for hours. Yet something unexpected happened. Small groups of Marines kept moving forward. One squad captured a seawall. Another found cover behind wrecked landing craft. Engineers blasted openings through obstacles. Flamethrower teams attacked bunkers one by one. Tanks that managed to reach shore joined the advance. Bit by bit, the Marine line continued moving inland. After Tarawa, interrogation reports described growing respect among surviving Japanese personnel. Several acknowledged that Marines continued advancing despite conditions they believed would stop any assault. Others remarked on Marine coordination between infantry, engineers, tanks, naval gunfire, and aircraft. Instead of isolated attacks, they felt they were facing a system in which every weapon supported the next. That impression appeared repeatedly in captured reports. One Japanese naval officer later reflected that defending against Marines was different from defending against a single unit. Even when infantry paused, artillery continued. When artillery stopped, aircraft appeared overhead. When aircraft departed, tanks advanced. Every pause seemed temporary. Every silence suggested another attack was already approaching. American investigators found another interesting pattern inside Japanese battlefield diaries recovered after Tarawa. Earlier entries often expressed confidence before combat. Later entries sounded very different. Some mentioned exhaustion caused by constant bombardment. Others described sleeping only a few minutes at a time because naval shells, aircraft, and artillery rarely allowed complete rest. Physical destruction mattered, but psychological pressure became just as important. As more evidence accumulated, investigators realized they were uncovering something larger than battlefield tactics. Japanese soldiers were not simply describing marine weapons, they were describing an experience. Landing craft appeared offshore before dawn. Naval guns shook the ground for hours. Aircraft circled overhead. Then Marines arrived in disciplined formations, adapting whenever the original plan failed. Every obstacle seemed to delay them, but never completely stop them. That consistency left a lasting impression on many defenders. The next major file came from Saipan. By June 1944, the war had changed dramatically. American forces now possessed overwhelming naval and air superiority across much of the Pacific. Saipan held enormous strategic value because its airfields would place Japan within range of new B-29 bombers. Lieutenant General Yoshitsugu Sato commanded more than 30,000 Japanese troops defending the island. They prepared caves, tunnels, artillery positions, and hidden machine gun nests across difficult terrain. The coming battle would test both sides like never before. When the Marines landed on June 15, naval bombardment had already struck the island for days. Yet many Japanese defenses remained operational. Hidden guns opened fire as landing craft approached the beaches. Casualties mounted immediately. The battle became a brutal struggle across sugarcane fields, rocky ridges, and fortified cave systems. Progress measured in hundreds of yards sometimes required entire days of fighting. Captured Japanese survivors later described something that investigators underlined repeatedly. They expected the Marines to become discouraged by the cave defenses. Instead, Marine units changed tactics almost immediately. Rather than charging every position directly, they surrounded caves, coordinated demolitions, used flamethrowers with engineers, and reduced one strongpoint after another. Japanese soldiers who survived these actions admitted they were surprised by how quickly the Marines adapted to each new obstacle. By now, the investigation was revealing a clear pattern. Guadalcanal had challenged old assumptions. Tarawa had demonstrated determination under impossible conditions. Saipan showed an ability to learn and adapt while the battle was still unfolding. But the most remarkable testimony had not yet been discovered. Deep inside the files marked from Peleliu and Jima, investigators found statements that would change the entire story. Those words would reveal not only what Japanese soldiers thought about the United States Marines, but how months of brutal combat transformed fear into reluctant respect. And those remarkable accounts begin in the next chapter. The next files came from two islands whose names would become permanently linked with some of the hardest fighting of the Second World War. Peleliu and Jima were not large places on a map, but every ridge, every cave, and every bunker turned into a deadly battlefield. It was here that American intelligence officers discovered some of the most revealing statements ever made by Japanese soldiers who had survived combat against the United States Marines. On September 15, 1944, the 1st Marine Division landed on Peleliu in the Palau Islands. Before the invasion, many planners believed the island could be secured within a few days. Instead, the battle lasted more than 2 months. Colonel Kunio Nakagawa had completely changed the Japanese defensive system. Rather than trying to stop the Marines at the beaches, his men withdrew into hundreds of caves connected by tunnels inside the Umurbrogol Mountains. Every position supported another. A bunker that appeared destroyed could suddenly open fire again from a hidden entrance farther up the ridge. Every hill concealed another surprise. Imagine it now. The tropical heat presses down without mercy. Sharp coral tears through boots and uniforms. Dust hangs in the air after every explosion. The Marines climb one rocky slope only to discover another hidden machine gun waiting above them. A cave falls silent. A Marine patrol moves forward. Then another burst of rifle fire erupts from a different opening only a few yards away. Every step feels uncertain. Japanese survivors later admitted they believed this new defensive system would finally stop the Marines. Instead, they watched Marine units slowly adjust once again. Engineers carried demolition charges directly to cave entrances. Flamethrower operators worked beside riflemen for protection. tanks fired point-blank into fortified openings. Artillery observers carefully directed fire onto ridges that had resisted for days. Progress remained painfully slow, but it never completely stopped. Several captured Japanese soldiers later remarked that what impressed them most was not speed. It was persistence. They described marine attacks as returning again and again, even after suffering losses. If one approach failed in the morning, another appeared before evening. If one company became exhausted, another replaced it. They realized they were not fighting isolated groups. They were facing an organization that continued adapting until every position had been reduced. American intelligence officers noticed another repeated observation. Japanese defenders often expected Marine morale to collapse after difficult assaults. Instead, they reported seeing wounded men evacuated while fresh units immediately moved into the fight. Supplies continued reaching the front. Artillery ammunition remained available. Air support arrived when weather allowed. To defenders trapped inside caves, this steady flow of men and equipment seemed almost endless. Only a few months later came another battle that would leave an even deeper impression. On February 19, 1945, the 4th and 5th Marine Divisions landed on Iwo Jima. Waiting for them was Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kurubayashi and nearly 21,000 Japanese defenders. Unlike earlier commanders, Kurubayashi ordered his men not to waste themselves in suicidal beach attacks. Instead, they remained hidden until the beaches filled with Marines, vehicles, and supplies. Then the island exploded. Artillery shells crashed into crowded landing areas. Mortars struck from hidden positions. Machine guns opened fire from Mount Suribachi and from strongpoints across the island. The volcanic ash made movement painfully slow. Marines struggled to dig protective foxholes because the loose ground simply collapsed back into place. Every yard forward came at a terrible cost. Yet something happened during the following weeks that repeatedly appeared in Japanese accounts after the battle. Defenders noticed the Marines becoming more effective with every passing day. Patrols learned where hidden firing ports were located. Engineers found better ways to seal caves. Tanks worked closely with infantry. Flamethrowers cleared positions that had survived artillery bombardment. Aircraft spotted movement and directed new attacks. Instead of repeating the same methods, the Marines constantly changed their approach. Some Japanese survivors later reflected that this ability to learn during combat was deeply frustrating. They believed every new defensive trick would surprise the attackers only once. By the next engagement, Marines often arrived prepared with a different solution. Captured documents from Iwo Jima also revealed another important detail. Many Japanese soldiers had entered the battle believing they would face opponents who relied mainly on superior numbers. By the end, several admitted they had underestimated the individual Marine. They wrote about small patrols continuing their mission after officers became casualties. They described machine gun teams holding exposed positions under heavy fire. They observed combat engineers working within a few yards of enemy caves while carrying explosives that made them obvious targets. Even those who remained committed to Japan's cause sometimes acknowledged the determination of the men advancing toward them. The investigation then reached the final great battle of the Pacific. On April 1, 1945, Marines and Army divisions landed on Okinawa. More than 100,000 Japanese troops defended the island under Lieutenant General Mitsuru Ushijima. Although the fighting involved many army formations, Marine units again played a major role in some of the hardest operations. By this stage of the war, many Japanese officers already possessed reports from earlier campaigns. They no longer dismissed the Marines as inexperienced or lacking courage. Years of combat had erased those assumptions. Interrogation reports from Okinawa revealed a striking change in language compared with reports from Guadalcanal in 1942. Early in the war, confidence had filled many Japanese statements before combat. By 1945, surviving soldiers more often spoke about overwhelming firepower, careful coordination, and the Marines' ability to continue fighting despite difficult conditions. Their expectations had changed because experience had replaced theory. American investigators compared testimony from dozens of prisoners captured over several years. Different men described different battles, yet similar themes appeared again and again. They spoke about relentless pressure. They mentioned discipline under fire. They described effective cooperation between infantry, tanks, artillery, engineers, aircraft, and naval forces. They noted that Marines adapted quickly whenever Japanese tactics changed. Most importantly, many admitted they had underestimated the opponent before the fighting began. That does not mean every Japanese soldier expressed admiration. Many remained fiercely loyal to their mission until the very end. Others never accepted defeat. Some interrogation reports contained anger rather than respect, but when investigators separated emotion from battlefield observation, a consistent picture emerged. The Marines had earned a reputation through repeated combat performance, not through propaganda alone. The reputation worked both ways. American Marines also learned to respect the determination of Japanese defenders. Battles across the Pacific proved that every island could become a fortress. Cave systems, hidden artillery, carefully planned defensive zones, and determined resistance forced Marines to change the way they fought. Victory often came only after enormous sacrifice. Thousands of Marines never returned home. Thousands of Japanese soldiers also lost their lives defending islands they had been ordered to hold at all costs. Years after the war, historians studying captured diaries, intelligence summaries, and interrogation records noticed something remarkable. The most valuable information was often found in the smallest observations. A tired soldier writing that bombardment never seemed to end. A prisoner admitting he had expected Americans to retreat. A battlefield diary describing Marines returning after every failed attack. None of these statements alone explained the Pacific War. Together, they painted a powerful picture of how combat changed beliefs on both sides. The investigation that began with one simple question finally reached its answer. What did Japanese soldiers say after facing the United States Marines? They did not all use the same words. They came from different units and different islands. Some spoke with bitterness, others with frustration, a few with reluctant respect. But many reached similar conclusions. They found an enemy who combined determination with planning, overwhelming support with steady discipline, and an ability to adapt that grew stronger as the war continued. In the end, the greatest lesson hidden inside those old intelligence files was not about one nation defeating another. It was about what happens when battlefield reality destroys assumptions. Before Guadalcanal, many Japanese soldiers believed they already understood the Americans they would face. After Tarawa, Saipan, Peleliu, Jima, and Okinawa, many realized they had been fighting an opponent far different from the one they had imagined. Today, those battlefields are quiet. The gunfire has faded. The smoke has disappeared. Palm trees once again sway over beaches where thousands of young men fought and died. Yet inside preserved diaries, faded interrogation reports, and carefully archived military records, the voices remain. They remind us that history is rarely shaped by myths. It is shaped by the experiences of ordinary soldiers who witnessed extraordinary events. And perhaps that is the most unforgettable discovery of all. Long after the war ended, long after the bunkers crumbled and the ships sailed home, the words left behind by those who survived still tell the same story. Respect on the battlefield was never given freely. It was earned under fire, one brutal island at a time.